Hello and welcome to Landscape Photography World. I'm Grant Swinburne and I'll be your host on this show discussing the world of landscape photography. This time I'll be talking to Gary Graham of GSG Images about his landscape photography journey. Gary's a professional photographer with a long history of wedding and motor racing photography behind him. He's recently been working with Audi Motor Racing as a photographer and has an amazing portfolio of images in that genre. He started to get into landscape photography in the last few years and is putting his many years' experience to work in that direction. You'll be getting to know Gary a little better and we'll talk about his inspirations and motivations, how he's developed his style and what he does and doesn't like about being a photographer. I hope you enjoy the show. Hi Gary, welcome to the podcast. How are you doing?
Good, mate. Yourself?
Yeah, getting there.
Great.
Been a while since we've been able to get together and shoot, so
yeah, I know.
Hopefully lockdown won't last too long and we can get back into it.
Well, fingers crossed and we can get back down to the beach.
When was the last time you actually got out to shoot and where did you go?
Oh, for me, it was with you, and I'm pretty sure. Oh no, it was in an evening where we went into Darling Harbour, down at Barangaroo.
Oh yeah,
no, I'm wrong, Grant. It was early one morning. We got up at stupid o'clock and we went back into Darling Harbour and we did those shots again.
Yeah.
And we got some magic
really
stuff.
Well. Had that beautiful fog come across in front of the Crown Tower and everything, and the ferries on the wharf and everything. It was a good morning.
You snagged some good stuff in there because I remember trying to keep up with you where you were going, and I just didn't grab it at all. But you got some rippers out of that, which was an awesome morning.
I love that pink colour that came through as well, which was and breakfast wasn't bad afterwards either.
No. I haven't had a bacon and egg sandwich quite like what we did there, where it had scrambled eggs on it. So it was good, and it wasn't expensive, so it was enjoyable.
Definitely.
So I can't wait to get back out.
Definitely. All right. Well, I'm going to start asking a couple of questions. So, how did you get into photography? What started you off?
Well, look, since we've been chatting about this, I delved back into the old memory banks and realised it was my father that guided me down the path. And he used to have this old Voigtlander camera, which was made in Austria. It was a 35mm camera and it only come out on special occasions. And he loved to take it with Kodachrome 25.
Wow.
And every year, or maybe more than every year, we'd get out the old slide projector and he'd bore us to death with all these photos that came out of the
slide nights. I used to quite like them, but depended on which slide set he was showing.
True.
The ones of him, out playing boats in the Navy, that was more exciting.
Look, Dad was good in that space, but that camera was protected and treated as if it was like gold.
Yeah.
So for me, it was always a fascination of why was this so special.
Yep.
And as we moved through, when I was about 12, I think they gave me my first camera, which was a little 110. What did they used to call them? Not a pocket camera, but
mine was a Agfa 110 Auto Star Pocket, I think it was.
Cool. And you used to get those flashes that were a little
the little cube, that used to spin around once.
Yeah. You get four shots and you'd hopefully snag something out of that. But that was really the start of my journey because it just showed me what you could start capturing. And that's pretty much what it lasted. I think I was about 12. Yeah. So that was, given I'm heading north in age these days, that was probably about 50 odd years ago. So, but it was great to remember those times with mum and dad that helped me sort of progress. And then it kind of went quiet because at that age you started thinking more about things with two legs and arms rather than taking photos. And as I got to 18, I decided to pick it up again and grabbed a Fuji think it's a Fujica STX1,
Cool.
which is the first camera I really owned, which was a 35mm, and it was absolutely manual. It did have a light meter in it that helped you, but everything in there, and I did do a bit of checking.
Manual.
Yep.
Did you have a zoom lens, or because that was
50 mil
in those days?
I don't think I could afford one of that back in those days either. But it had what was it? It had a half a second was its lowest shutter speed, and it had a shutter sync of a 60th, and that was something that's just not heard of these days. But it helped me to take stacks of photos, and I used it on a trip. I wanted desperately to see how to use these things, and I did a quick trip from Sydney to Auckland and back in a day just to try out my new camera, and I bought it duty free. So that was why I did that. But I also need to know I did work for Qantas at that time, so it was quite easy to jump on a plane and go back and forward. And that was my first roll of film that went through it and had a ball.
I should add for the listeners, that was where you and I met, wasn't it, at Qantas?
Correct.
Gary had been there some years before I got there. I spent about 18 years working for Qantas, which was one of the reasons why I've been able to travel so much. And I think Gary beats my 100,000 Ks or so by a few 100,000.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun, and in that, I mean, if truth be known, you and I met in the year 2000, and the IT dilemmas that were posed by
the lead up to year 2000, making sure that the Y2K bugs were all squashed.
Yeah, so that was a lot of fun. But at that stage, we would always talk about digital photography, or no, maybe that was later down the track. But look, really, for me, I stuck it out with film for a long time, and I did run a business for many, many years doing wedding photography.
Yep.
And that was all with film. And I actually did have one of the first Canon digitals that were released as a 35mm sort of choice, which was something called a D30. And it was the first Canon SLR with a cropped sensor.
Yep.
But as much as the camera was good, nothing was available that was good enough to print with it. So you'd have these leaps and bounds going forward with all your camera gear. So your cameras would go there, then the printers would come up, then your cameras would go again, and then your printing would come up.
Yep.
And the initial ones with your printing in those, everyone looked like they were plastic models.
Yeah.
And they just couldn't get the contrast right, and it was pretty ordinary stuff. But I worked quite closely with Canon to develop Sydney's operation of the Canon cameras up to a D60.
Yep.
And I was using my experience with working with this work with Canon to try and get ourselves to a position where the skin tones were actually acceptable. So the D60 came along.
Yeah, they look like people, not creeple.
Yeah, oh, that's it. So my transition from film to digital was quite an interesting and long fought challenge, I guess is the way it went. I was a believer in digital. We got there eventually, and obviously we'll go through that later on. But so
it took a little while to get the tech right. The early days were a bit rough, but
it took heaps to do that stuff. And even now, when I look back on it, you think, "Oh, how could they do it?" And the little screen on the back that you could look to see what the image was supposed to look like. Yeah, wow.
Gave you an idea.
So much. Oh boy,
that was about it.
That was terrible, but we had a crack at it, which is good. And the other part of that was my wife actually worked for Canon.
Okay.
And she was in a company called Cisra, which was their, I guess, their development arm of their all their ideas that came forward from printers, medical equipment, faxes, all sorts of things, and cameras as well. A lot of it was initiated out of Australia. So I did have a bit of a hand in getting some early input into what was going on, which was great.
You've been a Canon professional for how long? Ages? Longer than you care to remember, probably.
Yeah, look, back then, probably I'd say 20 years now.
Yeah, okay.
Which would be, it's very much worthwhile for me. With moving away from wedding photography, which was, I loved doing it, but you certainly had I guess you had a very matched group of people where you have a bride who was super stressed out on the day, some of the grooms that didn't care less, some of the brides that were just bridezillas.
Yep.
And you sort of worked your way through it. But at the end of it, you ended up...
That's the reason why I've never got into portraits and wedding photography. I don't like people.
Look, today I still love doing the photography. And as you know, despite, I know we're talking about landscapes here, but I'm still very much into people and photographing them, to the point where for the last 8 years, I've been Audi Australia's race photographer. And I do all their work all over Australia, into New Zealand. And some of the keys is, a car is always a car going around a track, and you can make it look fast or whatever, but the expressions on the crew and the drivers and gaining their confidence is something that I'm thoroughly enjoying and continue to enjoying. And hopefully once COVID gets out of our little environment, we'll get back into it. But that's the sort of stuff it is that look, photography is just a good thing. It's great to create, and it's great to see the look on people's faces.
So how about landscapes? When did you sort of start venturing into that?
So landscapes, I can blame you. More than anything, I probably did some landscapes very early on in my life of photography over in the UK, because the opportunities are vast over there. But probably, was it about a year and a half or a year or so ago, you and I got back together.
Yep.
And you dragged me down to La Perouse in the middle of the night. One of these stupid o'clock times we got up. You brought along
down to Cape Banks, if I remember rightly.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah. And you brought along some miner's lights.
Yep.
And off we went into the bushes. And I just thought, oh, you've got to be kidding. What are we doing? And I went off with a tripod and my camera. And the very first point we got to was just after there was a helicopter pad that's down there, the emergency helicopters. And we walked through, and there's this sign. And the sign says, "Be careful, 6 people have died here recently."
Yeah, they fall off the cliffs occasionally, yeah.
Yeah, so
or get bitten by the red-bellied black snakes. Yeah,
yeah, well, you didn't mention that to me. But
no, I didn't.
We carried on. We carried on, and we walked around this cliff face, and you'd found some caves that we ended up sitting in. And the photos that we got out of there were just brilliant. I
don't think there's anything better than just sitting somewhere quietly watching the sun coming up, taking snaps of it.
It was awesome. Whereas the stuff that I'm used to taking is rather high speed, wide apertures, and this was tripod, slow speed, still wide apertures, but it was just brilliant. And it's some of the things that I remember so vividly and value so much was that opportunity to go down there with you. And
thanks, man.
We crawled out of there. We crawled out in the pitch black, but we did it. And if you'd go back there now and you'd look, my God, what were we doing? But the photos were just brilliant that you got out of there.
Yeah.
So that was my first, I guess, foray into our efforts with landscape. Now, landscaping for me, I've loved the early morning type of work, and I love the colors that you get across there. Yeah. Now, sometimes it works. It's a bit of a lottery with the weather, but I know that you should really consult the Grant Swinburne weatherman's app before you do anything, because he seems to be pretty
I wish
spot
it was mine. I'd be making more money than I am now. But I use what's it called? Clear Skies and Windy. They're the two that I look at for the weather. But I also use photo pills and the photographer's ephemeris. That's more about that's more for things like astro and working out where the moon or the sun or whatever's going to rise or set, so you can work out. If I stand here, I'll be able to line it up with that building or that cliff face or whatever.
Yeah, look, photo pills is one of my favourites as well, but I still haven't got the hang of the weather and what the clouds are like with it. Now we've had a lot of success. We might have had one or two duds, but out of all the times we've done. And the other thing that I love about the landscape work is that I've been able to go to places that, despite me living in Sydney for 60 years, I've never been to. And it's just brilliant to explore your own backyard.
I'm still finding places as well.
It is awesome. And
Google Maps is great for that, though, because you can just sort of look at something and say, "Oh, that looks like an interesting structure there," or I reckon there could be some something that you can line up there that and then you get into the other apps and you can start playing around and work out. Yeah, well, if I'm there on that date, at that time, I can see the sunrise between those two pieces of rock or whatever.
Look, it's just awesome. Some of the stuff that you've created down south, which is the ones you've posted in recent times, but I know you haven't been down there.
Down Sapphire Coast and Narooma and Eurobodalla,
absolutely awesome stuff.
Stunning down there. I'd go and live down there in a heartbeat if I could.
Oh, it's beautiful. But for those of you who are listening to us, I do want you to know that Grant doesn't roll his trousers up, and he quite regularly gets caught in a wave. And his equipment, well, he looks after it pretty well, and it's still going. So whereas I stand back a bit.
I did kill the 6D once. Well, while we're talking about gear, obviously you're using Canon gear. What do you got? What do you shoot with, and what do you like shoot with? What do you like about it? What don't you like about it?
Okay, well, right at this point in time, I've got a 1DX Mark II.
Yep.
Also have a 1D Mark III. I have a 7D Mark II, a 5D Mark IV, Mark III, and original 5D.
Yep.
But what I like shooting with for the most is the 1DX Mark II. And that's really because it's quick, unbelievably fast focusing, and you do have to add your lenses into all this sort of stuff as well. So I've got a 400 2.8 Mark III, and that I'm looking at to see whether that'll transfer over into the mirrorless cameras coming up.
But you're going to go mirrorless?
I'd say there's a fair chance, as long as the financial manager approves it. We'll see how we go. That's my wife.
Okay. I understand that.
It's more, I like the fact that the biggest thing that I've found in the last, say, 6 to 7 years in the newest cameras is the auto ISO.
Yep.
And whilst when you're using in your landscape photography, you drop that down to a manual ISO, for me, out on the track or anywhere else, having an auto ISO stops you having to worry about, have I got the right shutter speed? Am I going to get a blurry image? Am I going to go through that? Whereas leading up to that, the 1D Mark III that I've got doesn't have that in it.
Yeah.
And it's always, it catches you out. Whereas with the auto ISO, it doesn't. So the newer ones coming through are pretty good.
Yeah.
So, which is all that. Before the 1DX Mark II, it was more a bit of a hit and miss. I'd probably, in the cars side of things, I would get maybe a 60 to 70% success rate, whereas now I'm more up around the 90, 95% success rate on an image. But transfer that to your landscaping, well, you don't have a problem because you're on a tripod, you're slowing everything down to try and capture some movement on the image that you're taking, so that it's still got a bit of interest. And you're only going to look at what Grant does and you'll find how good he is at taking all these fantastic flow shots and finding all the right locations, which is something I'm more of a follower on that with Grant, because he's been a fantastic coach at this. And some of the stuff we've been able to create together is just brilliant.
Yeah.
Plus, don't forget, we get up at stupid o'clock in the morning and we go and take photos, and then we have a great breakfast after that. So that's pretty cool.
That's the standard plan, isn't it?
Yeah, that's awesome.
What about lenses? You got a favourite bit of glass, or?
Yeah, I think my most used lens.
It depends a lot on what you're shooting too.
It's the location, yeah. But even at the track, I've got a 70-200 2.8 series 2. And the quality that you get out of those is just brilliant. I think it's got to be one of my favourites.
I picked one of those up secondhand myself recently, and over the moon with it. It's a good. I didn't go with the Mark III because apparently, from all the research I did, the only difference is the lens coating.
And the hit to your back pocket.
Yeah, well, aside from I didn't see the point in spending another $1.5 or whatever it is for a lens coating.
The ones that we've got now, they've got that fluoride coating on it, so I think I can't see how they get much better than that. But the 70-200 is an awesome lens, and the other one that I enjoy using is I've got a 16-35 f4.
Yep.
Which is working well. I know you've got one that's slightly faster than mine, but that seems to be 2.8.
Yeah,
really good for the landscape.
That's my go-to for the ultra wide, standard landscape shot. But I've been since I got the 70-200, I've really enjoyed using that for getting some of those close-ups. Things, across the harbour or whatever. If you're over at Cremorne or Kirribilli, and you can really zoom in and get a very different shot. Particularly, I also picked up I bought that new though, a 2x extender. So, bumps it up to that 400mm. The thing that I didn't realise that did though was it also expands your aperture. So you can get you can get as small as f64. But
it comes with a price though, because it goes the other way as well. So instead of having
you lose a bit at the faster end, But it was interesting playing around with that and seeing it. Oh, I can go to f64. What does that look like? I mean, it was okay. It just depends on what you're doing and how you're using it. But
that sounds like the old pinhole camera that you used to do at school. And that's what an S64 would be looking like, I think, a pinhole camera.
So what about things like filters and whatever? You got a few of them, or you?
I've got an end. The only thing that I really use in the way of filters is I've got a polarizer that fits in the 400 as well as a screw on at the front that you can have for your. I've got a 100-400 lens as well.
Yeah.
I also have an ND8, which is quite handy if you want to slow your camera down, especially for your landscape work. But for me, with the sports racing, if I want to get the blurry actions and it's a really hot, bright day, then an ND8 on the front will help me get it down to a 60th or maybe enough to get some motion in the background, but not too much, because it's pretty hard to shoot at 100 or 50 and get that down. But when you're doing your landscaping, that seems to be, I think that's a prerequisite to have some filters to be able to drop the amount of light down that you're pulling into your camera and let you get that movement of the water and anything else that you want to try to pull in.
Yeah,
but that's all I have.
Okay. Do you think you have a particular style that you're going for, or are you just sort of searching for that still?
I think in landscaping, my style is I'm copycat at the moment off Grant Swinburne, to be honest. Whereas when I go out and do the car work, well, that's my own style, and it's quite easy to pick myself. And given that I've done it for so many years and all the guys that I've met through there, it's pretty cool. But whilst I'm on a bit of a holiday from the cars, it's absolutely awesome to go out and do the landscaping work, because I think what I'm getting out of that is just an ability to learn more. and to understand how you can utilize your camera.
Yep.
And not just pick it up and shoot it, pick it up and understand what it's doing and how you're capturing those images. And then you've also got, you've got our photography as one side of things, but I'm sure you're going to ask me, well, what about the other side? Because it's once you get it home, it's different again.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I'm copycat Grant Swinburne at the moment.
You're too kind, man. So do you take in a particular? I guess just trying to frame this question in the right way. Does the processing workflow dictate the way you shoot, or does the way you shoot dictate how you process? Or
the way I shoot
is a mix.
I actually think it's a mix, and the reason why it's a mix is I don't get enough time on the circuit to change things too quickly because the cars are coming past at a huge rate of knots.
Yep.
And if I wanted to change something there, then I would bugger it up for the next one.
Yeah, right.
So I just shoot away what I know is going to deliver for me. And then if I want to adjust it or do anything more, I'll do it at home. Now I'm an Apple person.
Yep.
And I'm a Lightroom person. And that's what I'm learning. Every time I use it, I learn more features about the tools. They change all the time.
Yeah.
But for me, it's a mix. It's not just, I don't set it up because I know it's just going to come out of my computer correctly. It'd be more like, I know I've got an image there. It's the style of image that I want, which is either blurry or it's makes the image jump out at you. So I like things that are, if you're doing a person, I want the background to be blurred out.
Yep.
I don't want
you want that nice creamy bokeh that you can get.
Yeah, that's it. And if I can do that, that's what I deliver. Because when I'm shooting out there, I don't take just one camera. I take quite a few with many lenses, and each one has its opportunities. Whereas if I come out with you to do landscaping, I'd probably take one camera, couple of lenses, a tripod, and that's pretty much it. But when I'm doing landscaping with you, I definitely shoot differently because it's when I get home and put it into Lightroom that the magic happens for me.
Yep. Yeah. Cool.
Not necessarily when you're out there.
Yeah. Yeah. I get what you mean.
Yeah. And I think too, you and I have much, whilst I say I'm copycatting you, to a point, because the way I take a single image and I'd shoot raw on everything I do. And I then look to manipulate that image when I'm at home doing landscape work. Whereas out at the beach with us, I don't think I have the patience that I know you have to create something that you've got so many years of experience doing. That I know we've spoken lately and I'm looking to head in that direction, but I haven't done it yet because I just, quite often I'm in awe of what we see out there and what we're capturing.
That's why I love doing it. It's what you see, whether or not even if I wasn't capturing it in the camera, I'd still love being beautiful out there, just watching it.
Yeah. And
particularly, even when you get a nice weather event, you get some big waves or something, it's just awesome.
Probably the next favourite I've got is when you and I went down to South Cronulla and we got there in the morning that everything was dead still in the rock pools. And we had this incredible orange glow that came across everything.
Yeah, it was a fairly clear day, but you had that beautiful orange, blue to orange gradient in the sky, and that was reflected perfectly in the pool there. That rock pool was. I was just surprised nobody was swimming in it, because every other time I go in there, there's half a dozen swimmers down there, doing their early morning dip, but.
Well, they hadn't gone home from the night before. That's half the problem.
One of the two.
That's right. But, one of the things that what I find doing those type of photos is that what I see through my eyes isn't always in the result of the camera.
Yeah.
And it's so much thinking that the camera, the way it reacts to light, usually overexposes for what I see. And so you need to learn that you need to drop it down. You need to slow your exposure down. You need to really shut your lens down so that you have a longer exposure time. But even so, then it's quite interesting that it's so different when you get it home to what you see in the back of your camera. And I think that just comes with experience. And the more you do it, the more you learn that just don't take what your camera says for gospel. Now, I know your camera, none of my cameras have the fold-out LCD panel at the back of them.
Yep.
And that is a huge advantage to setting up your camera and your exposure, because you can see what's going on in there.
I can literally put the thing on the ground and still see what's going on.
Yeah.
Like I showed you though with the app, you can still do that on your phone if you
True.
If you want to.
Yeah, both of us are in IT. Yours just connects straight up. Mine doesn't, and it's a pain in the backside. And mind you, without all the cameras that I mentioned, the only one that has the Wi-Fi capability is the 5D Mark IV, which is built in. The 7D Mark II, you can get a little SD card and put into it. But truly, it just doesn't. As much as I love to say, "Oh, it's brilliant," I can't get the damn thing to work every time.
By the time you've got it in, more lessons, man.
I reckon. By the time you got it in, you missed your opportunity. So
I know what you mean.
Interesting.
For me, it's one of the reasons why getting somewhere early is important, because it's not just you've got to find your composition, but B, you've got to set your tripod up. You got make sure your camera's level, all that sort of thing, and then I got to hook it up to the Wi-Fi to make sure. So it's probably about a 7 or 8 step process by the time I'm set ready before I can take my first shot. Unless I'm doing something handheld, but can't do many of them at 4 in the morning.
No, not really. And you need to make sure you haven't damaged your cameras when you slip on the rocks and fall on the backpack.
Yeah, well, that's okay. That doesn't help either, does it, Gary?
Doesn't help either. You got to keep smiling. Wow, that's cool.
Do you have a favourite spot to shoot, or
Look, for me, I love the ocean. So for me, it's the waves breaking on the rocks. The rock pools that we've been finding, and sunrises seem to just put a smile on my face, and I just get a real buzz out of taking them. So that for me is what I thoroughly enjoy at the moment. And sunsets, well, we haven't had too much success with sunsets.
There was a nice one tonight. It really
was there?
Yeah, it annoyed me because of lockdown, and I can't go out and shoot it. No, there's some lovely pink and orange in the sky, and grumble. Anyway, nothing can be done about it. So
no, just have to get through this little stage, and hopefully we come out the other side of it okay.
Yeah,
just good.
So what's the most important element to your photography, and why is it so important?
For landscaping, I think it's the composition, and especially when we go down to the beach, I'm looking for something that draws your eye around the photo. So instead of it just being one central point, I'm trying to find multiple areas in the image that just creates some level of interest. So it's not just it's just a bit of some waves and a sunrise. I'm trying to get your eye to sort of move around the print as it comes out. So if someone's got a print of ours and they want to display it, that's fantastic. But it's more having somebody see what you've done and provide some feedback that's positive or negative, doesn't really matter, but to go where they're really enjoying what you've created. And that to me is a real buzz. And that's with the landscape is something that's really cool to have. And from my other stuff that I do, it's just the feedback that you get from the guys where they've got an expression on their face or whatever it is, and they appreciate the effort that goes into it, because it's not something that anyone can just pick up and do. You can have a real estate photographer yeah, that's cool. But can you go down to the beach and grab something like what you've been able to do? No.
Yeah. Some can,
And
some can't. It depends
yeah,
on what they're into. Yeah.
very much. And it's different horses for different courses.
Yep.
And I've certainly found my transition away from weddings into the motorsports side of things, as well as landscaping, is much more a much safer way to go forward, where you're not dealing with people's frustrations
Yeah.
and coughing it out there.
Yeah.
But
Clients are a joy, aren't they?
quite interesting. But the stuff that you get with landscapes, it's peaceful, and you get something that you bring it home, and you sort of, the family are just like, wow, how did you do that?
Yeah.
And that's a real buzz. That's really cool.
Cool. So what about things like social media? Where do you stand on that? Is it been a good thing for photography, a bad thing for photography, indifferent? Photography's dead, photography's, grown because of it?
I don't think photography is dead in any way, shape,
nor
or
do
form.
I.
But I think it allows the photographer to get his passion out there and let people understand what you can create and how you can use our skills to benefit them.
Yep.
It's whereas before, without social media, it would be word of mouth. And for me,
the marketing
with the wedding
was a hell of a lot
business,
harder.
yeah, very much so. Like, you've got stuff now that are so good that you can position your photos onto this company's website. You basically don't have to do a thing.
Yeah.
And they'll manage it, frame it, print it, do whatever for you. And you've created the actual integral part, which is the image.
Yep.
They don't touch that image. They just sell it from what's in there. And you couldn't do that before. I used to have to work with a company in New Zealand to do the printing of our images and put our albums together.
Oh, wow.
And come across. And I mean, they did a brilliant job, but it was bloody expensive. And
yeah, I can imagine.
During this current
shipping costs
lockdown,
killer.
Oh yeah, it was huge. But I'm actually been going through to. My father used to help me a lot with the books in our wedding business, and I'm going through shredding everything at the moment and looking at what we used to pay for film, for the development costs, for everything. We used to do 12 to 13 rolls of 35 mil at a wedding, plus a few rolls of 120 film, and also some black and white. So you'd be up for $300 or $400 in film costs and developing costs just to shoot a wedding, and you'd get 36 shots there. So, but again, that was going back. You'd have word of mouth. You didn't have the ability to market yourself in a way. So, from a marketing perspective, there's a lot of people out there.
Yeah,
and there always has been.
The market's pretty saturated, even in landscapes and so forth. And
yeah,
I mean, I don't know if you've delved into it yourself or not, but you've got the NFT space, which has started up and emerging as a new way of buying and selling and owning art digitally. Which I think for my kids and yours and maybe your grandkids and whatever, they've grown up with this. For us,
it's just normal.
Being old dinosaurs like we are, but it might be a bit this is a bit weird. Why would you do that? But I mean, I've chucked a couple up there. Are you thinking about it? Are you looked at it? Or
look, I think that's an opportunity for me to go forward. A lot of the stuff that I do is owned by Audi.
Yep.
So from the race perspective, I would have to be very cautious of what I do in that area, of course, of copyright. But that's what affords me the luxury of doing the stuff that I am, and I'm happy to do that. But for the landscape work that you and I are up and doing, I think it's a good opportunity. I think it's a point in time now where we've got a little extra time up our sleeves, given we can't go anywhere. We should probably be exploring that a little bit more.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I'm as I said, I've dropped a couple of things into the NFT space, and I've had a bit of an explore around it. Haven't had any success in getting anyone to bid or buy anything. So any collectors out there, go for it. You know.
Come on down.
You'll find my work on grantswinbournephotography.com. But yeah, more seriously, I as I say, I think for our kids and our grandchildren. Not that I've got any of those yet, but I know you've got a few.
I've got a couple in now.
Yeah. I can certainly see them. That'll just be the way that art gets shared now. And printing will still happen because people still like things on walls. But I've seen some amazing stuff happening with interactive wall spaces that aren't necessarily screens as well. Where people are doing different things with lighting effects and whatever, built into the picture, so that it's interactive as opposed to just being a static image. So I think
that's pretty cool.
The sky's the limit on some of that stuff. It's fascinating to watch. Yeah. Coming as I say from the dinosaur days of having to wait a week for your film to come back from the chemist.
Right, I remember that. You'd put it in, then you'd come back, and is it here yet? Is it here yet? And that would it'd be a week, wouldn't it, to come back?
Yeah, 3 days was a quick turnaround.
Do you remember there was places called Pacific? Was it Pacific
over
Labs?
In Carlton, then down there. Was it Carlton or Allawah?
I think it was Carlton.
Yeah. Carlton, yeah. I dropped a few films in there to be done on occasions. But I mean that was massive. The print lab there. It was a huge building. Probably would have been half a block long.
I think digital's good. The only thing that, because we've moved away from the film, you and I have experienced all that. No one else is going to know about it. You can still buy film, and I've got 35mm cameras sitting in there that just collecting dust now. I've got the original EOS 5s, and and I think they brought out one that I've got too, which is a 5 that had eye focusing in it as well, which I believe is coming in the new R3 that they're bringing out. But if you need your eye to help you focus, or to put your eye on where the object is going to be, give it away. It's not worth it. So anyway,
so what
pretty cool.
What do you and what don't you like about being a photographer? There's some really good bits, obviously, and we talked about some of them. But what's the stuff you don't like?
I think, to be totally honest, the stuff that I don't like is the post-processing, and that's more because of the length of time that it takes. It's easy to bang off 12, 13 frames a second, and then you've got to come back and you've got to go through and you've got to start picking the ones that you don't want, and that just takes hours and days. And that's the bit that I find a little challenging. Whereas whilst we do our landscape work, we're not doing 13 frames a second.
You're not doing 2,000 frames a day.
Heaps better. Yeah. And the thing that is just a little bugbear for me is that once I've done my work, I need to push it over to Germany.
The internet to play with.
It's just a joke, and it just goes. In Australia, it's just embarrassing. So that's my bugbears. But the other thing is, it does take a lot of time finding the right images to cull.
Yep.
Finding the right images to put out there to be accepted.
Finding what's a keeper and what's not.
Yeah. That's the bit that I think it's a labour of love in there, unfortunately. Love taking the photos, not necessarily all the rest of the stuff that goes along with it, and making sure you put in place a process that will enable you that in 2 years' time, when someone comes to you and says, hey, have you got a shot of this car on this day at this event? And then you've got to go and find it.
Yep.
So it's good file management and structure that you need to have in place. And whether you store it on your own premises or you throw it up in the cloud, that's another little discussion we should have down the track.
Yeah, no worries. Yeah. So what do you like to do when you're not out shooting? What's your downtime from photography, which is downtime?
It's just working around the house, to be totally honest. Like right now, I'm painting my office.
Oh, okay.
So taking the opportunity to do
Better
things like that.
me.
But look, I have two fabulous grandchildren that have arrived recently, so that takes time with both of my grandsons. But you know what? I'm taking photos of them too. So it's a big part of my life, and it's a big part of my wife's life as well. And she gets a thrill out of the stuff that we do. So I don't know. And when you say my downtime, it's either gardening, but I do it. You've got to do it, or mucking around with my camera equipment. So
cleaning it.
yeah. Well, that's for you.
Yeah, I'm always cleaning my gear.
Just one for everyone out there too. At Christmas time this year, I became a little extravagant and bought one of those cabinets that it's like a dry cabinet. Yeah. And I keep all my gear in that, and it's all locked away. And so far, so good. No mold, no nothing. But let's see what happens in a year. Does it dry the seals out? Does it dry things? I don't know. We'll have to see.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how they come out when we get out of lockdown. Speaking of lockdown, how are you handling the pandemic?
Look, at the moment, I miss being able to grab you to go out and take photos.
Yeah.
I miss being able to see my kids, because at the moment we're in a lockdown that
the lockdown's been pretty tough, I think.
Yeah, not quite. So, and we've spoken about I'm fully vaccinated. I've got vaccinated. I've got AZ, and I'm still alive to talk about it. Because that's such a dangerous thing.
Get vaccinated, people. If you're not vaccinated, go and get vaccinated.
Get it. God, if you don't want to, go and get a lottery ticket, because you'll probably believe you'll win that rather than anything else. I think it's just going to have to. We just got to get through it. We've got to get vaccinated. I can't see any other way of getting around it. But right now, it's quiet. I can hear all the birds in the street, whereas before you'd hear traffic. It has some benefits, but I wish it would just be over.
Yeah, no, same here. I don't think there's anyone out there wants it to keep going.
No, absolutely not. No.
Well, I got one last formal question, and I'm going to ask if you got any questions for me in a sec too. But I think this is the most important question. Do you like pineapple on your pizza?
I'm afraid it's got to be a yes to that. I'm definitely a ham and pineapple person. But yeah, so let's leave it like that before we upset anybody.
Fair enough. Sounds good. You got any questions you want to ask me? Anything you want to know?
I reckon I'd like to know if you're going to join me along the path of going for a mirrorless, and what you think about that, if you've had a look at it.
I've been keeping an eye on it, and I'm thinking about it. The economics of changing all the glass eventually. I know you can buy an adapter, but I can't see how that adapter doesn't change your focal length somehow. Even I'm skeptical at the moment, but I guess, and that's the thing. That's one of the reasons why I've kept with Canon bodies, is because I've got an investment in Canon glass, and it does bring about when you go, all right, well, I'm going to change formats entirely. Does bring about the question, okay, so do I change brands? And I know that there's a lot of competition out there, and Sony makes most of the sensors anyway for everyone. But it's an interesting market, and I think I'm not quite ready to jump, because I haven't finished getting value out of the DSLR at the moment. I'm still enjoying using it. I'll probably do it in the next 12 months, I think, but I'm not set yet on what direction I'm going to jump, and it'll be interesting. I know Canon's got quite a good selection there with the R series, but there's Sony, there's Fuji, there's Olympus that aren't too bad. There's a lot of good gear out there. I'm not particularly wedded to a particular brand for any other reason than I've bought some stuff in previous iterations, and therefore I want to stick with that because I don't want to waste the money that I've spent.
It's just I agree with you there, and I'm actually thinking it through. I guess it doesn't matter what brand of camera you've got, especially when you put into the effort that I know you do with your post processing. And so as long as you've got an image that you can manipulate in Photoshop to the level that you like to do, like it doesn't really matter what you buy then.
Yeah, well, if that's the thing, if you're shooting RAW and you've got yourself a good composition and you've got your light right, you're shooting in good light, but also you've exposed it properly. And that's one of the reasons why I do bracketing, so that I can manage that exposure well. And to be honest, changing brands might make me change the way and the style that I shoot. But I haven't thought too much about that side of it. But I think brand doesn't matter that much, other than the thing is, it's like any brand that you buy, whether it's Apple, Microsoft, or whether it's Canon, Fuji, or Sony. They're all going to try and lock you into their ecosystem, and that's why all the mounts are different. I know that there are some universal mount things that you can buy that, but again. I don't trust them. So.
No, God, no. Yeah. Hey, look, and what I want to clear up too is when I just said that you'd like to do a lot of mucking around with your Photoshop, what I was really wanting to mean by that is that you've got the ability to create an image that your eyes see, whereas your camera still can't do that. And what I'm meaning by that is that your level of expertise that you've got now pulls out fine layers of detail that you see when you're there looking at things, but when you come back in the camera, get your camera back out, you don't get that. And that's what the beauty that I've seen come out of your stuff is that you just look at it and go, oh my God, I didn't even know that was there.
Part of that's focus stacking, because one of the things that I do, and I take probably more shots than I need, but one of the reasons why I do that, and certainly more than I ever use, but one of the reasons I do that is so that I can select from both the exposures as well as the focal points and the focal lengths. Because depending on the lighting conditions, I might be focused on the horizon, or I might be focused on the rock 2 feet in front of the lens, Okay. And so depending on what aperture I'm at, obviously you can't always get everything in focus. Focus to infinity usually gets you there in most cases, but it's not guaranteed. So one of the things that I do is, so I'll take a bracket. I shoot brackets of 5, so I take a dark through to the brightest exposure. I normally, and again, depends on the light conditions and whether or not there's high contrast in what you're seeing. So when the sun's almost up and it's getting really bright, but you've still got dark shadows in the foreground or on the sides of the image, that you want to bring details out. One of the things that I want to do is make sure that I've got that detail to play with. I may vignette it out or darken it anyway, and no one will ever know. But what I do know is that there's no noise there because it's properly exposed. So I'll expose from the darkest exposure for the highlights, and the brightest exposure for the darkest shadows, so that you can then blend those together. But I'll also then take a series at different focal lengths using that same aperture setup and so forth. So
okay, all right.
pardon me, you can then select from which bits of which image when you're doing the blend. And sometimes I might do one blend of 5 and then blend it again with another blend of 5, because it has foreground elements or elements that I want to put in focus.
But even while you're doing that, you're not actually changing what we see.
No, I'm trying not to.
Yeah, and so I didn't want people to think that I'm saying that you're doing this, lots of editing and things like that. You're actually
I don't have a bird's brush or anything and add birds in.
Yeah.
I have cut and paste a moon occasionally.
But really, what it is you're trying to provide an image that's what we see. Because even to this date, your cameras, as good as they are, still don't give you what you can see.
Give you that dynamic range that your eye.
And that's
for
what
me.
You've been
For me,
able
it's
to...
about trying to give the viewer the experience of me standing there, whether it's knee deep in a stream or on a rock shelf with waves, or standing across the harbour looking at Barangaroo or whatever. And to me, it's that experience that I'm trying to convey in the image, so people are actually saying, "Oh yeah, I have." Luckily, I've heard that from a few people occasionally. It feels like I'm there. It's I get that, and part of that. Some of that's shooting wide, shooting panos can do that, because you get that wider field of view, and people get that feeling, oh yeah, well that's the whole view, rather than. But then there's other shots which are focused right down. And there's one that I did which was actually 100% crop of a 400 mil shot across the harbour towards the city, that literally just kind of blew the Opera House up out of the image, and with good glass and with good shooting technique and good processing, you can bring that out, and it looks good in that detail level if you've done it right.
Yeah. So I know we've spoken a lot about it, and the next time we go out, I know that you're going to guide me on a few tricks to go through on that. But for what I've done, because I shoot it in RAW and go to Lightroom, I just basically go back, make sure I've got the color profiles correct, so that they're, rather than using the camera profiles, I use the Adobe profiles to what's there, mainly because the majority of people that will print anything, that's better to have it set up for Adobe than anything. But and then you can set up the settings to correct for your lens, and then that's about all I do. And you come out with some pretty good stuff. But I've got a long way to go.
I do quite a bit of contrast adjustment. So when I do that again, it's a selective edit. So I set up masks so that you're looking at sort of mid ranges, mid-range tones, shadow tones, and highlight tones. And one of the things I do is for each of those sets of tones, and I kind of do two mid-range, 2 shadow, using curves adjustment layer, 2 highlights. Using a curves adjustment layer, I then sort of tweak the contrast so that it doesn't. The trick there is not to distort the color. You can get color distortion when you're doing that, but if you're subtle with those curves rather than being and there's also techniques that you can use like blend if, where you can actually protect the darker, let's say, you protect the darkest shadows or the brightest highlights from being affected by that curves adjustment layer as well. So there's just little tricks and techniques that I use to sort of, get the contrast that I want. Because I usually do I mean, it's not necessarily massive contrast, but I like a bit of contrast, particularly on the edges, and to give you that detailed view.
Make it jump.
Yeah, just to make it pop out a little bit, because to me, otherwise it's just a little bit flat. I like there to be depth, and I'll also use a bit of dodge and burn there as well to sort of bring certain highlights or certain certain shadows down, so that it's trying to give you that depth in the image.
I know you go to a great length to make sure whilst you do a bit of Photoshop work in there, it's not. You make sure it doesn't look like you've done any Photoshop work.
Yeah,
and I think that's a real skill.
I don't know. I just try to make something that looks like it looked on the day. The closer I can get it to. I mean, I like some vivid colours and so forth, but sometimes they're there in nature. Sometimes you can tweak a little bit to get a little bit more pink out of the sky or something like that. But to be honest, for me, it's about making it look the way that I experienced it and the way that I saw it. And that's really all I'm trying to do.
I have certainly picked that up from you in going through there. And the other thing that you've guided me onto is getting a good tripod. So
you got to have good legs, otherwise, if you want to go long exposure, you're going to struggle without a good set of legs.
Yeah, ones that are salt waterproof as well would go a long way.
Yeah, they help, particularly with what I do.
Oh no, look, it's certainly worth considering is getting out the camera and a tripod and get up early in the morning and have a crack at it and try to underexpose what you think your camera's saying, and you'll be amazed at some of the results you get.
Yeah, well, I normally stop 2 stops down with my bracket, so the center exposure value is 2/3 of a stop down from center. So the middle exposure is actually underexposed by 2/3 of the stop. I don't always do it. Depends on the lighting conditions and the contrast that I'm seeing. But to me, I've kind of worked away with the filters. I'm usually using either a 3-stop, the ND8, or the ND 3200 or whatever the 10-stop is. 32,000, I should say.
That's it.
Whatever a 10-stop, the black one. It's usually one of those two that I'm using. Occasionally no filter if it's still quite dark, and I can get if I can get it upwards of 20 or 30 seconds. Without a filter, then that's not a bad thing either. Because then you can
definitely
get that
tripod material,
creamy water. But you got to have a tripod to do it. Unless you're able to really hold it still.
Oh, no,
I mean, even if you don't have a tripod, I know some people take like a little bean bag sort of thing, those wheat bags.
I've seen those, yes.
Yeah. So what you can do is you can actually rest your camera on that. If you want to get down low, or you want to set it up, and it just sort of nestles in there, and you can set yourself up. And as long as you got either a remote release or a wireless release or whatever, then you can you can shoot those long exposures without a tripod.
Yeah.
But I don't want to carry that kind of weight around. I've trimmed it down.
Which one do you prefer?
Which?
Are you wireless or remote, or a wired remote?
I use my phone, so I prefer the wireless one, because it lets the nice thing about the app that I've got, I can set the f-stop and change it without touching the camera. The only thing I don't think I can change the bracketing, so I can change the center EV to a different one. I can't change the width though. So I normally spread them out 2/3 of a stop. So each exposure is 2/3 of a stop apart. And
right.
then I normally step that down 2/3 of a stop.
Okay, and that gives you your 5.
Complex. And that 5 gives me the right dynamic range for most conditions. There are some conditions where I throw that out the window and it's centre EV, or sometimes I'll go even darker. I'll go a full stop down, or sometimes even further if the lighting conditions sort of demand it on the highlights that or the shadows. So depending on it's a thing that I've kind of learnt to do with shooting the way that I do, is you kind of read the conditions, and and that's just come from a few years of taking lots of shots, bringing them back, seeing what the result looks like, and then working out, okay, well, next time I'll go and do something slightly different, and I'll try a bit of experimentation. So it's the only way to learn, as far as I'm concerned.
No, I agree with you completely. And I do have a challenge for you.
Yeah.
I need both of us to find, as the summer conditions arrive, I need to get some lightning photos.
Yeah, I haven't had much luck with those. I haven't.
No, me either.
Haven't been out in a storm. I'm usually staying dry. But it's something that I want to do. I remember actually the last time I shot lightning was down on near the mouth of the Bega River down the south coast.
Yeah.
And I was there shooting this log that was sort of in the water, nice still calm water and everything, getting a few reflection shots and that. And just coming on sunset. Sunset was a bit of a bust, so there wasn't much there. But then this storm started coming up from the south, and saw that there was a couple of flashes of lightning. So I sort of turned the camera around to fit them in, get the log, build a composition out of that, and I got a couple of nice strikes. And then the storm kind of stopped, and that was it. It's like, okay. And so I went home and sat and watched the telly at the end of the night.
Let's see what we can do this year. I'm sure we'll be
definitely
out of lockdown and see what we can do.
It's been absolutely fantastic talking to you. Thanks very much for doing this. And
my pleasure, mate.
We'll get out there and shoot again soon. And looking forward to actually seeing you again in the flesh. Yeah,
same, mate. And breakfast, can't wait. So thanks for having me on board with you this evening. It's been a bit of fun. So thank you very much, and hope that everyone enjoyed this that are listening in.
Yeah, thanks, mate. We'll talk later. And thanks everyone for listening. We'll see you next time on Landscape Photography World. Bye for now.
Stay safe.